Would I be the AH if I divorced my pregnant wife after discovering her unforgivable betrayal? I had been with my girlfriend since we were both 15 years old. We grew up together, navigating the challenges of adolescence and young adulthood side by side. Our relationship was the envy of our friends, a perfect love story that seemed destined to last a lifetime. As the years passed, we remained inseparable. We celebrated our successes, comforted each other through setbacks, and dreamed of a future together. My girlfriend's best friend was always there, a constant presence in our lives. She was like a sister to us both, and I never questioned her loyalty or the strength of their bond. But as time went on, I started to notice subtle changes in their friendship. They would exchange glances that I couldn't quite decipher, and their conversations would abruptly end when I entered the room. I brushed it off, telling myself that it was just the natural evolution of a long-term friendship. Little did I know that beneath the surface, tensions were brewing. It started with small disagreements, petty squabbles that seemed insignificant at first. But as the weeks turned into months, the rift between my girlfriend and her best friend grew wider. I tried to be a mediator, to help them find common ground and reconcile their differences. But my efforts were in vain. The once unbreakable bond between them had been strained to its breaking point. Then, on a day that would forever be etched in my memory, everything came crashing down. My girlfriend's best friend showed up at our doorstep, her eyes red and puffy from crying. She demanded to speak to me alone, insisting that she had something important to tell me. As we sat in the living room, she took a deep breath and unleashed a bombshell that shattered my world. She told me that my girlfriend had been cheating on me with a mutual friend of ours, and that it had been going on for 2 years. I was stunned, unable to process the information. My mind raced with questions, trying to make sense of the betrayal. How could the woman I loved, the one I had built my life around, do something like this to me? Confronting my girlfriend was the hardest thing I had ever done. I watched as her face contorted with anger and disbelief when I revealed what her best friend had told me. She lashed out, accusing me of not trusting her, of believing lies over her word. But her refusal to provide a direct answer only fueled my doubts. The more she deflected, the more I questioned everything I had ever known about our relationship. The foundation of trust that we had built over a decade had crumbled in an instant. As the days turned into weeks, the distance between us grew. The love and comfort that had once defined our relationship were replaced by suspicion and resentment. I found myself turning to her best friend for support, seeking solace in the one person who seemed to understand my pain. Little did I know that her motives were far from pure. As I struggled to come to terms with my girlfriend's alleged betrayal, her best friend was quietly plotting, weaving a web of deceit that would eventually ensnare us all. In the aftermath of the revelation, my world was in chaos. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't focus on anything but the searing pain of betrayal. My girlfriend's best friend became my lifeline, the only person who seemed to understand the depth of my suffering. She listened patiently as I poured out my heart, offering words of comfort and encouragement. She held me as I cried, assuring me that I deserved better, that I was worthy of love and respect. Slowly but surely, I found myself drawn to her, seeking solace in her presence. As the weeks turned into months, our friendship deepened. We spent hours talking, sharing our hopes and fears, our dreams and aspirations. She became my confidant, my rock, the one person I could always count on. But even as I leaned on her for support, I couldn't shake the nagging doubts that lingered in the back of my mind. My girlfriend's refusal to admit to the cheating, her anger and defensiveness, it all seemed too convenient, too calculated. I tried to push those thoughts aside, to focus on the present and the future I was building with my new love. But the past had a way of creeping up on me, haunting my dreams and casting a shadow over my waking hours. As our relationship progressed, I found myself constantly comparing her to my ex-girlfriend. Every smile, every laugh, every touch was measured against the memories of what I had lost. I knew it wasn't fair, but I couldn't help it. And then, just when I thought I had finally found happiness again, everything came crashing down once more. It started with little things, small inconsistencies in her stories, furtive glances at her phone when she thought I wasn't looking. At first, I dismissed it as paranoia, a result of the trauma I had endured. But as the days turned into weeks, the evidence began to mount. Late-night phone calls, unexplained absences, a growing distance between us that I couldn't seem to bridge. I tried to confront her, to ask her what was going on, but she always had an excuse, a reason why I was overreacting. She would turn the conversation around, accusing me of not trusting her, of letting my past experiences cloud my judgment. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, that the woman I had come to love and depend on was hiding something from me. The doubts and fears that had once plagued me with my ex-girlfriend came rushing back, overwhelming me with their intensity. I knew I had to do something, to find out the truth once and for all. But the thought of losing her, of being alone again, was almost too much to bear. I was torn between my desire for answers and my fear of what those answers might be. As I lay awake at night, staring at the ceiling and trying to make sense of it all, I couldn't help but wonder if I had made a terrible mistake. If, in my rush to escape the pain of my past, I had blindly stumbled into something even worse. The only thing I knew for certain was that I couldn't go on like this, living in a constant state of uncertainty and doubt. I had to confront the truth, no matter how painful it might be. And so, with a heavy heart and a sense of impending doom, I prepared myself for the confrontation that would change everything. 3 years had passed since that fateful day when my world was turned upside down. In that time, I had managed to pick up the pieces of my shattered life and move on. I had found love again, this time with my ex-girlfriend's best friend, and we had built a life together. As I stood in the nursery, looking down at my pregnant wife's sleeping form, I felt a sense of contentment wash over me. We were expecting our first child, a little girl, and I couldn't wait to meet her. I had never been happier, never felt more complete. But even as I reveled in my newfound joy, I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something was amiss. My wife had been acting strangely lately, more distant and evasive than ever before. I tried to chalk it up to the hormones, the stress of impending motherhood, but deep down, I knew there was more to it than that. It all came to a head one evening when my wife's sister came to visit. She had always been a bit of a wild card, prone to outbursts and dramatic reveals, but nothing could have prepared me for what she had to say. As we sat in the living room sipping tea and making small talk, she suddenly turned to me with a grave expression on her face. "There's something you need to know," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "Something about your wife and what really happened with your ex-girlfriend." I felt my heart skip a beat, my mouth going dry as I tried to process her words. What could she possibly mean? What secrets had been kept from me all this time? With shaking hands, she reached into her purse and pulled out a stack of papers. "These are text messages between my sister and your ex-girlfriend," she said, handing them to me. "I think you should read them." As I flipped through the pages, my eyes scanning the words in front of me, I felt my world crumble once again. The messages revealed a shocking truth, one that I had never even considered. My wife, the woman I had come to love and trust, had fabricated the entire story of my ex-girlfriend's infidelity. She had used their falling out as an opportunity to get close to me, to manipulate me into leaving my girlfriend for her. She had played on my fears and insecurities, feeding me lies and half-truths until I was so confused and broken that I couldn't see straight. I felt like I was going to be sick. The betrayal was so deep, so profound, that I could barely breathe. How could she do this to me? How could she lie to me for so long, let me build a life with her based on nothing but deceit? I confronted her that night, my voice shaking with rage and pain. She tried to deny it at first, to spin more lies and excuses. But when I showed her the messages, the evidence of her treachery, she finally broke down and confessed. She had been in love with me for years, she said, watching from the sidelines as I built a life with her best friend. When they had their falling out, she saw her chance to finally make her move. She had never meant for it to go this far, never meant to hurt me like this, but her words rang hollow in my ears. The damage had been done, the trust between us shattered beyond repair. I knew in that moment that I could never forgive her, never look at her the same way again. As I walked out of the room, my heart heavy with grief and anger, I knew that my life would never be the same. The future I had imagined, the family I had dreamed of, it was all gone in an instant, and in its place was a gaping hole, a wound that I knew would never fully heal. The days following the revelation were a blur of pain and confusion. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't focus on anything but the overwhelming sense of betrayal that consumed me. How could the woman I loved, the mother of my unborn child, have done something so unforgivable? I found myself constantly replaying the events of the past 3 years in my mind, searching for signs that I had missed, clues that could have warned me of her true nature. But even as I combed through every memory, every interaction, I came up empty. She had played her part to perfection, never once slipping up or revealing her true intentions. The thought of her deception made my skin crawl, my stomach churn with revulsion. I couldn't bear to be in the same room as her, couldn't stand the sight of her swollen belly, the physical reminder of the life we had created together. But even as I recoiled from her touch, I couldn't ignore the love that still lingered in my heart. She was the mother of my child, the woman I had pledged my life to. How could I reconcile those feelings with the knowledge of what she had done? I sought solace in the company of friends and family, pouring out my heart to anyone who would listen. They offered words of comfort and support, but nothing could ease the ache in my chest, the sense of loss that pervaded every waking moment. As the days turned into weeks, I found myself growing more and more distant from my wife. Our conversations were tense and strained, punctuated by long silences and unspoken accusations. I could see the pain in her eyes, the desperation as she tried to make amends, to salvage what was left of our relationship. But every time I looked at her, all I could see was the lies, the manipulation, the years of deceit that had led us to this point. I couldn't trust her. Couldn't believe a word that came out of her mouth. And without trust, what foundation did we have to build upon? I knew that I had to make a decision, to choose between my love for my unborn child and my own emotional well-being. It was an impossible choice, one that tore at my very soul. How could I be a good father if I was constantly consumed by anger and resentment towards my child's mother? But as much as it pained me, I knew that I couldn't continue living a lie. I couldn't pretend that everything was okay, that we could somehow move past this and build a life together. The damage had been done. The wounds too deep to heal. And so, with a heavy heart and a sense of impending loss, I made the decision that would change the course of my life forever. I told my wife that I wanted a divorce, that I couldn't be with her anymore, not after what she had done. The look on her face as I spoke those words will haunt me forever. The shock, the disbelief, the utter devastation as she realized that her actions had finally caught up with her. She pleaded with me, begged me to reconsider, to give her another chance. But I knew in my heart that it was too late, that there was no going back from this. As I walked out of the room, leaving her sobbing on the floor, I felt a sense of numbness wash over me. The pain was still there, the anger and betrayal still simmering beneath the surface. But there was also a sense of relief, a feeling that I had finally taken control of my life, that I was no longer a puppet dancing to someone else's tune. The weeks following my decision were a whirlwind of emotions. I found myself constantly second-guessing my choice, wondering if I had made the right call. The thought of my unborn child, of the life I had dreamed of building with my wife, it all weighed heavily on my mind. But even as I grappled with my doubts, I knew that I couldn't go back. The trust had been broken, the foundation of our relationship shattered beyond repair. I had to move forward, to find a way to heal and rebuild my life on my own terms. I sought the advice of friends and family, pouring out my heart to anyone who would listen. They offered words of support and encouragement, reminding me that I was strong, that I had the power to overcome this. But even as I listened to their words, I couldn't shake the feeling of uncertainty, the fear of what the future might hold. As the day of the divorce drew near, I found myself growing more and more anxious. I knew that I was about to take a step that would change my life forever, that would forever alter the course of my child's life as well. The weight of that responsibility, of the choices I was making, it all threatened to crush me. But even as I struggled with my own emotions, I couldn't ignore the anger that still simmered beneath the surface. Every time I thought of my wife's betrayal, of the years of lies and manipulation, I felt a fresh wave of rage wash over me. How could she have done this to me, to our family? The final confrontation was a moment I will never forget. As I sat across from her in the lawyer's office, I could see the pain etched on her face, the desperation in her eyes. She pleaded with me one last time, begging me to reconsider, to give our marriage another chance. But I knew in my heart that it was too late. The damage had been done, the wounds too deep to heal. I had to do what was best for myself, for my child. And so, with a heavy heart and a sense of finality, I signed the papers that would end our marriage forever. As I walked out of the office, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. It was over, the lies and the deceit finally behind me. But even as I savored the feeling of freedom, I couldn't ignore the pain that still lingered, the sense of loss that threatened to overwhelm me. I knew that the road ahead would be difficult, that I would have to navigate the challenges of single parenthood and the emotional fallout of my decision. But I also knew that I had the strength to overcome, to build a new life for myself and my child. And so, as I stepped out into the bright sunlight of a new day, I felt a glimmer of hope for the first time in months. I knew that I had made the right choice, that I was finally free to chart my own course, to create a future that was truly my own. The pain of my wife's betrayal would always be with me, a scar that would never fully fade. But I also knew that I had the power to heal, to move forward, and embrace the possibilities that lay ahead. And with that knowledge, I took my first steps into a new chapter of my life, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead with courage and determination.